So this is the first episode of the Bond Fitness podcast. So welcome to anybody listening to this, and thank you so much for giving me your time, really, to listen to this podcast. Um, I guess it's kind of interesting to talk about what I'm kind of hoping to achieve with the podcast. Uh, the answer is very straightforward. It's basically what I've been trying to achieve with the gym itself, which is to provide a service, provide a platform that is not your traditional fitness platform. What we are not doing on this podcast, what you won't hear me talking about, is a bunch of alpha male, testosterone fueled gym speak. It's not what we do. Bond Fitness, as everybody who has ever come into Bond Fitness knows, is all about body and mind. And that's what this podcast is going to be all about. It's going to be about the body, it's going to be about the mind. I'm not a trained psychotherapist, but I have a very keen interest in psychotherapy. I did a foundational master's in psychotherapy. I've had a lot of psychotherapy, and I'm very interested in how we can connect the body and the mind to provide wellness, which is a slightly annoying buzzword, but to provide wellness inside and out. So I guess that's what I'm looking to do with this podcast. And I think I wanted the first episode really to be a kind of introduction, I guess, to me, an introduction to what Bond Fitness is, I suppose. And one of the things that I have labeled Bond Fitness on social media, I guess to a degree, is I've called it the anti-gym, right? Because I want, as I've said already, for Bond Fitness to be something different, for Bond Fitness to be very, very different from a traditional big box gym. For example, the Virgin Actives, the David Lloyds, the Pure gyms, that type of thing, the easy gyms. I want it to be very different from your CrossFit gyms, your High Rocks gyms. I want it to be very different, to be completely frank these days, from a lot of the personal training, small group training gyms that are out there. What I do want to be clear about from the get-go is this is not a shot at any of those places. I think all of those places are great. I think all of those places have their place in the fitness industry. It's just not what I wanted to do. I wanted to create something different. I wanted to create something where community came first, where we lead with empathy, where we are all about making people feel understood, welcomed, valued, where perhaps we are a place for clients who maybe feel a bit intimidated by traditional gyms. I'm that, to be completely frank. I'm somebody who has been to pretty much every gym under the sun since I started training at 14. And I'm a member now at Nuffield, as well as having my own personal trainer, as well as having my own gym, right? But I wanted to create something very different. And I guess I wanted to kind of just talk through a little bit of that story, the story of how I came to create Bond Fitness and why, for a little bit of context, really. So that's what the first episode is. It's called Why I Built the Anti-Gym. So the first time that I properly started training was when I was 14. And I actually hadn't put this link together even when I started Bond Fitness. But it's funny to realize that actually the reason I was bought a gym membership in my hometown, Stamford, Lincolnshire, 14 years old, was my mum bought me the gym membership because at the time I was depressed. I was really, I think clinically depressed. I was only 14. By that stage, I'd already had two therapists. I had one when I was, I guess, 10, maybe slightly older, because I was suffering from what I now realize is quite high level OCD, pure O, they call it, which is all about intrusive thoughts and anxiety. And then another therapist in my 13s and 14s, again for, depression, anxiety, OCD, which the OCD hadn't been named as such. I now recognize that's what it was. And kind of, I guess, as a last resort, or perhaps because my mum had read up on the benefits that physical exercise can offer, mental health, my mum bought me a gym membership. And it was a gym called Westside in Stamford, run by an amazing dude, a Scottish guy called Duncan, who was hench, huge bodybuilder, heart of gold. Um, and I started training there with my oldest friend in the world, one of my absolute best friends, Mike, because as some of you may know, I had made a very strange decision, I suppose, that I wanted to be a professional wrestler. And I mean, look, you talk about escapism, right? That's really what I was trying to do, was escape my reality and become something different. And so training there at that gym, you know, really became a part of that wrestling dream. Myself and Mike would go there every day. And I was a guy who, I had friends but I didn't really fit in. I didn't really fit in at school. I didn't really, you know, I wasn't your typical, student, I guess, at the school I went to. Um, I was quite shy. I was quite anxious. And I found myself in this gym, which really the weights section, and by the way, this kind of informs so much about what Bond Fitness is now as well. The weights section was quite a small part of the overall gym. So it was on two levels, as I remember the gym. The downstairs was kind of like a spa area. There were saunas and steam rooms and stuff, a cafe. Um, and and then upstairs, like it was split into thirds, I guess, and two-thirds was cardio equipment, one-third was free weights, and it was old school free weights, so a lot of metal, very few machines, and there were a ton. It was like bodybuilder paradise, right? All of the kind of bodybuilders in the town. This is a very small market town, Stamford. Used to go to West Side to lift weights, and I found myself at 14 and 15 and 16 kind of being adopted by this bodybuilder community and really being accepted, I guess, for who I was at the time. They used to call us the wrestlers, and they taught me how to lift weights. And I didn't feel intimidated in that gym because I was so welcomed by all the people, who were training there. Although I absolutely recognize that if I walked into that gym now, I'd be so intimidated because it was a lot of meat, it was a lot of sweat, blood, and tears. But I got my early education in weightlifting and in training from those guys who taught me so much. And I really kind of fell in love with it. I fell in love with bodybuilding. I fell in love with weightlifting. I fell in love with training. Went out and bought all the books, bought the Arnold Schwarzenegger bodybuilders Bible, bodybuilders manual, and learned all about the one rep max and just got really into it. Taking every supplement under the sun, every legal supplement under the sun. I was offered a hell of a lot of illegal substances, of course, at the time, but I never did them. Kind of no judgment, really. That's a different conversation for a different time, but it wasn't my thing. As I say, I pursued the wrestling dream for a while. For those of you that kind of don't know, I actually even ended up flying out to America before deciding this was a terrible idea and coming home. And then I pursued another form of escapism, I suppose, which was acting. I was lucky enough to go to a fairly recognizable drama school in South London, where I trained for 3 years and met some great friends. And then I was lucky enough to work as an actor. I worked for BBC, for the radio drama company, and I worked on the West End, and I worked in the Lake District, and I did some national tours. But the whole way through, fitness was a huge part of what I did. I remember always training for the parts that I was playing, whether it be to drop body weight, whether it be to add muscle. I did my fitness instructing diploma, whatever you'd call it, in I think 2007, I don't know, what would it have been? I was still at drama school. So 2009, maybe. Um, and I did my personal training qualification a few years later. And I sort of sporadically used it. I had a few clients here and there that I'd pick up and would have to drop when I would go back to acting work and so on and so forth. Um, and I loved acting, like genuinely, I love acting. I don't, silly as it sounds, I don't consider myself as not an actor anymore. I still think of myself as an actor, but an actor who is very picky about the work that he does choose, um, and an actor who doesn't get offered very much work, to be honest. But acting is now a secondary career to what I do. Um, and there was a moment, a very distinctive moment, where those two careers came to a kind of crossroads. And it was in 2016. It's around the time I turned 30, actually. I just finished a production, a tour that I was on. I was doing a production of The Lady Killers, actually, in up north in Harrogate and various places. And I remember that job finished just before I turned 30. The job finished. I wasn't living anywhere. I had to move back home with my parents. And I didn't have any more acting work lined up. And the idea of not working and not having a steady income. I had met the woman who is now my wife, and we were thinking about moving in together. And the idea of having a family down the line was there, but there was a bigger pull, and it was like I had this huge passion for acting, this huge passion for performance, and I wasn't able to do it. At the same time, I had this huge passion for fitness, and I was choosing not to do it as a career. And so I guess light bulb moment, I made the decision in 2016 that like, look, I'm not going to take any more theater work. Theater was the thing that would mean I have to quit, jobs and move away and go on tour and, blah, blah, blah. And instead, I'm going to focus on somehow getting myself into the fitness industry. Yeah. So I took a job and it wasn't as a trainer, wasn't as a PT. I took a job in near Watford, in Bushy at a country club. And I took a job in fitness sales. And the phrase duck to water is kind of appropriate. I found it incredibly easy. I'm going to do a podcast all about fitness sales because there are so many salespeople out there that I see that just get it wrong, across the board wrong. They're trying to use these kind of hackneyed American, like almost kind of corporate car sales techniques on people for fitness. When the reality is, all you have to do is find out what the person wants and why. What all these salespeople didn't understand, and what I figured out very, very quickly when I started working in fitness sales, and this was just a big box gym, right? This was a country club. It had a gym as part of the golf club, right? So I had all walks of life coming in. And what I realized was people coming into a gym is a deeply personal experience, a deeply personal experience. I knew that already from the personal training clients that I had, right? I knew that already from, what was it, 2008, did I say, working as a fitness instructor? I would work with clients and I would get talking to them about what it really meant. Like, I would understand it's not just about like, oh, I want to look good in photos. There was a deeper meaning. It was a confidence thing. It was a personality thing. I started even back then, 2008, 2009, whilst I was still an actor, to become really interested in working with people 45 and above, 50 and above, 60 and above, especially women at that stage, because I found it deeply moving that I would get chatting to people and eventually find out that the reason that they were coming into a gym was to finally put that spotlight back on them because they'd given everything to their families, to their kids, or to their spouse, or to their career, or whatever. And for some reason, they'd taken the spotlight completely off themselves. The old phrase is they'd let themselves go. Well, I just don't think that's true. I think circumstance forced them to stop caring about their health. And so admitting that, by the way, being able to admit that It's such a deeply personal thing. And I felt really genuinely honored to be a person that they would share that to. And as I say, I'd worked in PT and taken PT clients, had to drop them, taken PT clients, had to drop them. And working in fitness sales just made it so easy for me to have those conversations because I wasn't coming in and trying to sell people. I think all my clients at Bond Fitness will recognize I still don't do that. I'm not trying to sell you on anything. I just want to find out what you need and how I can help. But I want to find out what you really need. And so, working at Bushy Country Club, I did that for about a year and loved it though I did. And I worked with some incredible people. It was minimum wage. And then I got picked up. I say got picked up. That makes it sound so grand. It's total bullshit. I didn't get picked up. I applied for a job in St. Albans with a personal training company that was then called the DVCC. And I got their sales job. And that was in 2000 and what, 17, end of 2017, I think, maybe early 2018. And I worked for the DVCC all the way through to starting Bond Fitness in 2022. And I worked my way up to essentially what I guess you would call their regional manager. At one stage, I was the person just below the owners. And it was an interesting experience, right? And I'm not here to shit on anybody. I think I'm very, very different to the people that ran that company, but I think it is important for me to stress. I learned, I mean, so much from the two guys that ran that company. I learned about sales. I learned about fitness. I learned about running a business. I learned about providing for one's clients. I mean, I had an, you couldn't get that level of education in a university specifically built to help people open fitness businesses. It was literally the best education I could have got, and I'm eternally grateful for that. And they specialized in working with people. I guess they would say like 50 and above. I don't know whether they advertised it as such. I genuinely can't remember. But their whole thing was it was an upmarket small group personal training gym. The thing that was missing for me was, and again, they were amazing, but those guys loved their fitness and they were big, muscly guys, and they were super into their fitness. And the thing that was missing for me that I wanted to explore was the mental health connection and the emotion that comes along with fitness. And so I made the decision in 2022 to start my own thing. As many of my clients know, I made it after moving away from St. Albans, moving to Milton Keynes, where I was working for the DVCC at the time, buying a house, and then about 6 months later going, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I've got to open my own thing. And so I did. It wasn't an easy decision. There was a long period of time when I was working for that gym where I thought that was it. Like I didn't really have the confidence, I guess, in myself to do it for myself. I was on a wage that I had kind of been reliably told would be it, like I'd hit a ceiling. And, you know, I'm not gonna lie, it kind of depressed me. Like I felt like, well, this is it then. This is it for life. And it was my wife who told me we went out for a walk, I remember, and I was feeling really low and kind of going like I'm too young for it to be like this is your career forever. This is your wage forever. This is it. I didn't really want to work for other people anymore. I had a vision inside. I hadn't really put it together yet, but I wanted to do something. And it was my wife who said, you should open your own thing. And I mean, she knows this, but I am so fucking grateful to her, excuse my language, because sometimes the most obvious route is obvious to everyone bar you, right? And it was not obvious to me that that's what I should be doing. But once I realized I wanted to open my own thing, I took a look at what I was seeing in the DVCC, in multiple other gyms that I'd explored both personally and professionally. And I realized the things that I wanted and the things that I didn't. The things that I wanted were community. The things that I wanted was a massive, massive spotlight on mental health, on emotion, on the emotion behind people going to the gym, on the emotion it takes to get fit again, on the emotion it takes to put the spotlight back on you, whether you're a woman or a man, on the fear and anxiety it takes to walk into a gym for the first time. I wanted to create something high level. I wanted to provide a high level service. I wanted to make sure our customer service was the best in the business, which I feel like it kind of is. I wanted to put a massive focus on making staff feel empowered, making sure my staff know that they can grow their careers, that they can grow you know, their pay, that they can progress through the company. I wanted to make sure that there was no hint of alpha male in the gym that I opened. I wanted to make sure that I made sure there were no mirrors on the wall. That was something I adopted from my previous job. I wanted to make sure that there were no kind of bicep pictures on the wall. And instead, I put artwork up, you know. I wanted it to be different. I wanted it to be the opposite of a traditional gym. I wanted it to be the anti gym. And I remember I was in Norfolk on a weekend away with my dad. And I was saying, like it's very obvious to me that this gym should be about body and mind. I just can't think of what to call it. And he said, "We'll put them together." And I said, MIDI gym. What a strange thing. And he was like, "No, not MIDI, like body and mind together, bond." And so my dad named the gym. And that really was it. Like that's what it was for me. Body and mind together, bond fitness, making you feel better inside and out. And it's kind of like it all became clear. Like so many of my clients think, it's just a nice relaxation that we do a meditation at the end of every small group, which we do, by the way. And I will get into the science behind that in another episode because there is a lot of science about what a meditation at the end of a workout does to your endorphins. But when I was walking around my previous job thinking about like, if I was doing this myself, what would I change? Like that was it. I would end every single session with something that helped the mind as well as the body. The meditation that we do at the end of every small group is literally Bond Fitness encapsulated. And I remember so clearly, oh man, the day that I took on the lease in the first Bond Fitness building in Chesham, choosing Chesham, by the way, I can't even remember how I chose Chesham. I did a few searches. I was looking at places in like Welwyn Garden City. I was looking at places in, where the hell is it? Nuneaton. And then I saw Chesham and I just fell in love with it. I saw they had a need. I saw they had the right demographic, a demographic that wasn't being served by what I knew we could offer. I took a lease on the first building, and that first day signing the lease was like, oh my God. Quitting my job was like, oh my God. I took another full-time job, by the way, for one of the great minds in fitness, a guy called Mark Coles, who has had his own gym, who mentors online personal trainers. He's one of the great minds in fitness. Again, completely opposite to me. He is the alpha male of all alpha males. And, it's kind of not sacrilege for me to say that perhaps we weren't suited well to, perhaps I wasn't suited well to him as an employee, but I think he's a great man. And I thought he was a great boss. And I learned again so much. But I was doing that full-time job throughout all of 2023 when I was the only coach at Bond Fitness. I opened the gym. I had another full-time job. And by the way, I had my first child 3 months into opening the gym. It was madness. But when I think about it, what a journey. And I'm proud to say that the very first training session that I took at Bond Fitness is exactly the same. It is exactly the same structurally as any session you would walk into here in July 2026 at Bond Fitness now. The coaching might be slightly different. The face would be different. We've got a huge team of coaches now, but the structure was the same. And I'm incredibly proud of that. I mean, there's this feeling that I wanted, I suppose, to create at Bond Fitness, which is when someone walks in the door for the first time and they sit down to have a chat with me about fitness, it's like they are walking into their therapist's office mixed with their favorite table at their favorite cozy pub, right? That's what I want them to feel. And I want them to kind of feel like that every single time they come to Bond Fitness. Oh, and by the way, they get an amazing workout as part of the package. And I'm proud to say that that happened for every client I met in 2022, all the way through to all the clients that I meet now in 2026. Bond Fitness started in 22 with nobody, just me, a sofa bed that I could sleep on so I could do the late shift into the early shift, a rack of dumbbells, and nothing else. And here we are now at 152 clients, a team of 5 coaches. We've helped probably 1,000 people now in that time. And that's what I want this podcast to do, by the way. I want that to be a continuation of that work, that we can put our message, our beliefs, that we can go out there and bust some of these kind of alpha male myths that are out there in the fitness world. I want this podcast to inspire people who have never felt comfortable in gyms before, who have felt intimidated by gyms in the past, to recognize that someone like me, someone who is now a fairly reputable business owner, an entrepreneur in the fitness industry, someone who has a very, very high level, successful gym, also feels like that, feels a certain intimidation by traditional big box gyms, wants to provide something different. That's really the Bond Fitness journey in a nutshell, is that I wanted to provide something totally different, tonally different, aesthetically different, environmentally different to every other gym out there. And I'm proud to say that I did that. And I shouldn't say I, we as a team, both clients and staff did that and created something amazing. And now I want to keep doing that with this podcast, with the Bond Fitness podcast, to create something that can touch people, even if they're people who live too far away to ever get to a Bond Fitness, but people who want that inspiration that, you know what, you don't have to be in great shape to start working out. It doesn't matter how long ago you exercised. It doesn't matter whether you've ever exercised before. You don't have to be an alpha male. You don't even have to love fitness to get fit. This podcast is really to tell people you deserve to put the spotlight on you, that you are worth something, that you are worth investing in. And I'm really excited for it. So that is the Bond Fitness origin story, I guess, why I started the anti-gym. I hope you enjoyed listening. I hope it was an informative and fun story. And if you liked it, give us a like, subscribe, hit follow. We're going to try and do an episode every single week. And yeah, we'll look forward to speaking with you again on the next episode. Thank you so much.